Hi all, so just to recap what we did yesterday in class, we talked about fractions and decimals and percentages. The first thing we talked about was equivalence. So what equivalence meant was for every fraction, decimal, or percentage, we could represent it in three different ways. So if we had a fraction, we could also represent that as a decimal and a percentage. And if we had a percentage, fraction and decimal, and so on. And we looked at this cycle of how we could change between each one. So I'm just going to do an example of one of these. So we have 3/4 and we want to change it into a decimal and a fraction. So the first thing we can do is say that we want to change it into a decimal. So we're going to do the top 3 divided by the bottom. So 3 divided by 4. And that would give us 0.75. So there's our decimal. And then if we want to change it into a percentage, we can multiply it by 100. So the decimal place moves twice, so we'd end up with 75%. If we wanted to go back to a fraction, from our 75%, remembering that a percentage is always out of 100, 75 over 100, and then we could simplify that by dividing by 5 and then 5 again, and we would end up with 3/4. So that was our equivalences. The other thing we talked about was how to find the fractional amount and how to find a percentage amount. So to find a fraction of any amount, and we talked about doing this without a calculator, we will talk about calculator methods for this in a bit more detail. You just divide the amount by the bottom number and then multiply it by the top number. So in this example, we want to find 3/4 of 24. We have 24, our amount, divided by the bottom number 4. So 24 divided by 4 is 6. And then we multiply this by the top number. So 6 times by 3 is going to give us 18. And this works for finding a fraction of any amount. Just divide by the bottom and then times by the top. The next thing we talked about was finding percentages of amount. Right? We talked about how we could use some tricks to do this without a calculator. So if we wanted to find 10% of any amount, we just divide by 10. If we want to find 5%, we divide by 10 and then we half it. If we want to find 1%, we divide by 100. And using these three tips, we can find any percentage of any amount fairly easily without using a calculator. So I've got an example here that I'm going to go through. I want to find 26% of 300. So I'm going to start off by finding 10%. So for 10%, I divide by 10. So 300 divided by 10 is going to give me 30. And then to find 5%, I just half this. So half of 30 is 15. And then for 1%, I divide by 100. So 300 divided by 100 is 3. And then I can use these building blocks to get to 26%. So if I know that 10% is 30, I can multiply that by 2 to get to 20%. So timesing 30 by 2 will get me 60. And then I need to make up the 6%. So I know 5% is 15, 1% is 3. So I could add these two together for my 6%. It's going to be 18. And then if I want to find 26%, 20% plus 6% is going to give me 26. So 26% is going to equal to 78. Okay, so that's the recap. I look forward to seeing you all next week.